So good morning. We're still in the thick of winter. It's very blowy, blistery, snow, cold, all that sort of stuff. So I got a kit for Christmas. I actually got 3 knitting kits from my husband, but one of these kits was the Roots hat. And definitely these hats are still in vogue for wearing right now because of the cold weather. So this is one. And I followed their pattern along to a T, and there's some things I decided to modify on it. Like they had knitting, even the gray period, they had it in ribbing. Now, I think I did that, but what I did is I did. I changed my needle sizes, and I changed the way that I uh, shaped the crown of the hat, because they had shaping the crown of the hat. They had um, knit 11, then knit and then increase by knitting 2 together, and then knit 11, then the next row is knit 12, and I didn't need all that. And they had every other row that you were knitting, so you would decrease on one row, and then you would knit a plain row, and then you would decrease. And I found that confusing, because I was like, where am I at? Am I knitting 11 or 10 or 9 before I decrease? So I just made it simple for myself, and I just decrease each row on the top. And if you've looked at my previous knitting hat video, that's how I do it. There's lots of different ways, but that's how I do it, and it still works out. Knitting these hats, this is a merino wool, and it's very soft and nice, and it's a very fine knitting needle. I used a 4 and then a 4.5. So the stitching's very small, especially compared to this, where I used an acrylic yarn and a 6 and 7, I think I used on this one. And then I also blended a secondary yarn so that I can get this sort of mottled look here. And so the stitching is different. I don't know if you can see that. So this one's smaller. So knitting this up goes faster. This takes a little longer, but generally knitting a hat takes me a couple of evenings, because I do that 2-6-2 process. 2 inches, in this case it's about 4, because I wanted a bigger rim, and then 6 for the body, and then a couple inches. By the time you start decreasing, you don't really need to measure it. But like I said once in a previous video, measure from the lobe of your ear to the crown of your head, and that's about how far you would need the hat to go. Now I'm making these hats for whatever. I sometimes keep a box of hats in my car, and if I see somebody on the street, maybe looking for money with a cup in front of them, I'll go over and I'll give them a hat. So I want to have a universal style or size, and so this does that. Look, it's cute, because I saw somebody recently wearing a hat that I gave them, and this is how they did it, sort of a slouchy hat. So it works. I was knitting a hat, and I'll show it to you in a moment, but I ended up pulling it all out because the wool itself from Loops and Threads was very stiff, and I thought, first of all, I'm not enjoying knitting with it, so that was an annoyance. And then I thought, I don't have to persevere through this. This is wool that was given to me. People find out, oh, you knit? I have some wool that they didn't use. And so they give it to me, which is great. So I'm knitting up hats that really don't cost me very much, that I can give out to homeless, secondhand shops, whatever, that I can give away essentially. So I was knitting on this wool, and it was so stiff and uncomfortable. And I thought, I don't really want to give away a hat, even if it's to the homeless, where it's going to be stiff and scratchy. So I took it all apart. I'll show you that. So while I was thinking about, what to do with that wool and knitting the hat, which I eventually took apart, I thought, I've got to knit with something soft. I mean, if you're going to knit, you want to enjoy the knitting process. And I do. I enjoy just the knit and purl and ribbing effect, but your wool itself needs to be soft. This is a merino. I took 3 strands and I mixed it with a drops wish yarn, and that gives it the color. And I actually have one of these knit up. I'll show you in a second. And I was at a social event over the holidays, and there was a student nurse there. And of course, I bring along my knitting. I always have my knitting bag. I think people think this is my purse. I knit in church, I knit wherever, I knit in the car. So I always take it because you never know when you're going to get a couple of rows in. And it's relaxing, and I can actually knit without having to look at the knitting. I can knit and talk to people, especially if you're just doing ribbing or straight knitting, which is just knitting in the round, knit, 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 knit. So I met this nurse, and so I was showing what I was working on, and she liked the hat and tried it on. So I said, okay, would you like it? So I gave it away. So, and I tried to explain the value of the merino wool. It comes from sheep in Spain. So this is me working on this one now because I did want one for myself. And I'm going to make it so that the body of the hat, so that we can flip up the brim. And then you've got this double exposure, double warmth on the ears. So it's a great hat. And again, I did do the 2 inches. I'm working on the 6. And then when I do the shaping, which is just doing every row, let's see, I've got 80 stitches of this, actually 84. So every 21 stitches, I will decrease a stitch, knitting 2 together, which is the easiest way to decrease. And I will shape the crown. I just do that every row, decrease every row. I don't do decrease, then knit a row, decrease, knit a row, as some patterns call for, like this pattern. The kit called for that. And that was good. I knit it up exactly the way the kit said because I just want to see what they said and how to do it. But then I added my own thing. I revised my own pattern. So that's what I'm doing in this. 2 inches, 6, and then just decreasing every round until I get to about maybe 12 stitches. Sometimes it's not quite working out. It might be 12, 16. It doesn't really matter that much because you can just pull it in on the top and sew it up, and it turns out pretty nice. And then if you want to add a pom-pom, which I had here, a little white fur pom-pom. Where is that furry pom? Here it is. That came in the kit. But you can buy those on Amazon. So you add that to the hat, and it's really quite nice. So you just sew it on. Now another hat that I may have shown before, which is the, I call it the speckled look, where you're knitting one color on one hand and one color on the other. So you're just going back and forth with each color. Makes a nice, unique innards. I didn't do ribbing on this one. I just put my stitches on and knit it. And I did do my decreasing and shaping at the top. And I left it as a rolled edge. And the reason for that is, and this one's been blocked, the reason I left the rolled edge, now this one's a bit small for me, but I left the rolled edge so that anybody could wear it. And it's just kind of easy. Different way to do it. You don't have to do ribbing. This is more for a young person, maybe 9 to 14, depending on size of head. But a young adult, let's say, or a child if they want to wear it loose. Then the next thing I'm working on is this one. And again, I'm using some of the principles that I learned or that this pattern called for. Casting on with a size 4 millimeter, and the circumference of the needle is 16 inches. So it's a size 4 millimeter, which I think is a 6 American, and a 16-inch knitting needle, so you can get all of your stitches on there. And so it's going to be slower going. Now here's a tip. In counting, I put these little rings on, which I picked up at the Michael's craft store over in the jewelry section. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. I think they're a couple of dollars for a package. And in this case, every 20 stitches, I put one on. And then it's easier for me to count as I'm casting on, because when you're casting on, you can get very fiddly with your hands. Like you just feel like it's just going to work. It's not comfortable. But once you get past those initial rows, you actually have something to grip while you're knitting, and it becomes a lot easier. I'm looking down because I got my little remote to turn off and on. The camera, that is, not me turning me off and on. Husband, I'm on. Now, I forgot to mention this wool. I don't know what this wool is. It's a type of, it is a 4 strand, but it's very thin. So it's a type of a DK, not a worsted weight. Worsted weight might be a little bit thicker. So it's sort of in between worsted weight and a DK. And again, this was a donated yarn, so I didn't get the labels. Don't know what it's about, but it does have this variegated color, which I like. So I do enjoy the Cascade Heritage yarns. They come in many colors, and I almost always have a white or black or a few whites on stock. So then if I have some extra wool, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with that? I might want to blend it, blend the colors, may even do a little bit more color work when I'm working on a hat. I think that's what I'll do next. So like wintertime is blowy snow, it's a great time to sort of sit indoors, keep cozy warm, wear your sweatshirts, my Renaissance College sweatshirt, and knit away. And if in time you will be able to knit, especially if you're just doing the straight knit stitch, knit in the round and glance up at a TV show, your husband, friend, wherever you are, sitting at a coffee shop knitting, looking up every once in a while, look down at your work. You just need to glance occasionally at your work. So in time, when you're knitting, you can get to that point. And that's a fun place to be because people are like, oh, you're knitting and you're not looking at what you're knitting? Yeah. Oh, wow. I had this 9-year-old say that to me. Oh, I love it when I see people knitting who don't have to look at their stuff. Now, she commented because she, at this social occasion, I walked into the room and there she was knitting. She got, she called them chopsticks. She said she opened up her Christmas present. What am I doing with these chopsticks? What is that for? And then she opened up the rest and there was some wool. And so her mom is teaching her how to knit. So she's working on a scarf. So I thought that was really cute. I'm like, oh, great. The Knitters Club is already here. So knit wherever you want, whenever you want, however you want. Work on your hats because they're real easy to knit, especially if you get the practice of it. And then it becomes second nature. So happy knitting, everybody.